All right, hello once again, Jeff Scott of Rankin Technical College, and as part of the Rankin Technical College AWD 1000 Web Development Technologies class, I've been doing a series of videos based on the Mozilla Developer Network Learn Web Development series. So I've gone over the getting started with the web and all that stuff that's in here, and now I'm in the HTML, structuring the web, and it's broken down into three sections. An introduction to HTML, multimedia and embedding, and HTML tables. Well, I'm still in the intro, and I've gone through the intro, getting started, what's in the head, fundamentals, hyperlinks, advanced formatting, and I'm up to the document and website structure. So I'm going to go through these two. Then I'm going to skip this assessment of marking up a letter, which I don't know why they did that, but we will look at this structuring a page of content. All right, so let's jump into this. This, to me, for lack of better words, is where this gets more interesting, and you really start to see the semanticness, if that's a word, that we were talking about starting to come into play. As the author says here, in addition to defining individual parts of your page, HTML has a number of block-level elements where you can lay out what's on the page. All right, what do I mean? Well, for instance, up here, this might be in a header section. This would be in a nav section. This would be an article. This would be a section type of thing. All right, so there's a lot of different ways that you can lay this stuff out. So very important that you read through this, because this is where we're going to start actually making our stuff look, whatever you want to call it, more professional or whatever. So as mentioned here, web pages can and will look pretty different from one another, but they all tend to share similar components. So the header, usually a big strip across the top of the page with a big heading, a logo, and perhaps a tagline. Usually stays the same from one page to the other. Now, just so you know, there's nothing to say, and what I'm going to actually end up doing eventually is taking my header and putting it over here and taking my different things that are here and moving them to the right. So in other words, my nav section is going to include a header at the top and then my navigation. All right. So as opposed to having a header and a nav bar, I'm going to have just a nav bar. All right. But I can put the header inside of that. That's totally legit. Okay. So the header, again, usually a big strip across the top with a heading, logo, and perhaps a tagline, you know, the motto or slogan for your company. Nav bar or navigation bar, links to the site's main sections. This can be on a single web page site. This can just go to different places on one page. You now know how to do that with those document fragments that we looked at a couple lessons back. Or you can jump from page to page. Main content. And the main content often holds sidebars, articles, etc. The main content is the area that's between your header, navigation area at the top, and your footer area at the bottom. And again, it can hold anything. All right. Okay, sidebar. All right, it says one thing about a sidebar. Now, this is me talking. Okay, I'm originally from Milwaukee, Wisconsin. I'm saying that not with or without pride, but I'm just telling it to you. And I still get the Milwaukee Journal Sentinel. All right, so if you look here, because they've changed this totally around, but the way that it used to work was, for instance, let's say that right here, okay, it's got here, it's the end of an era for Telemark Lodge in northern Wisconsin. Okay? All right. And then maybe over on the side, they'd have another story that's over here that would say something like, owner of Telemark Lodge, sorry to see Lodge go. Where this would be something that's tangential to this. And you've seen this kind of thing, you know, before. For example, let's say that our main story here was a fire. And then over here, they had, you know, let's say that one of the firemen ended up saving a young child. Then over here, you'd have a thing that, let's say this is the third child that the fireman has, or firewoman, it doesn't matter, has saved this year. That would be tangential. So that would be something you could put, for example, in a section. Now, there's no hard and fast rules on how all of this stuff is set up. In other words, you can have in your main content section, you can have articles, sidebars, an article within a sidebar within an article, etc. The footer is typically what's shown on the bottom of the page. So again, there's the footer, there's the header, there's the nav bar, this whole thing in here, all of this thing that's in here, that's the main content area. This would probably be a section. In fact, this would probably be an article and a section, but there's a lot of different ways that it could be set up. So as it says here, the simple example that's shown above here is not pretty, but it does a good job of illustrating how a typical website might be laid out. All right. Some websites, as mentioned, have more columns, are more complex, but you get the idea. With the right CSS, you can pretty much set up elements anywhere you want, have them wrap and look the way you want, etc. It says, but as discussed before, we need to respect semantics and use the right element for the right job. And that's what the rest of this section talks about. It says this is because visuals don't tell the whole story. We use color and font size to draw people's attention to something, etc. One thing about this, and if you look here, very interesting statistic. This is not the numbers I'd heard. I'd heard approximately 10% of the world is colorblind, but it says here 8% of men and 0.5% of women, so that should work out to around 5%, so it's less than I thought. But the point is, you want to make sure that when you're using colors, you don't use colors where the background is similar in nature to the text that's going on the background, because colorblind people then can't discern the difference between the two, and you're making it hard for them. If you make it hard for them, they may end up leaving your website. It's not what you want to have happen. All right. In your HTML code, you can mark up sections of content based on their functionality. What does that mean? There is no right answer for that. That means that you can make things look the way you want them to look, where you want them to look, and how you want them to look. So to implement semantic markup, it says HTML provides dedicated tags, and they're shown right here. So this is the first time when they're going in and doing this. So you'll notice in your head section here, this is still the head, but I should jump down into the body section. Here's your header. Here's your nav. Here's your main section. Here's your footer. So let's grab what they've taken here. I'm not going to put this into our current document. I'm going to create a new document. All right, so I'm going to just grab all of this. And I'm going to go and come into here, paste that in, and I'm going to save this as semantic.html. This is the best way for you to learn this stuff. I'm just telling you right now. All right? And that is to play with it, not to sit and listen to me talk, but to play with it. I'm going to change this. So the copyright symbol will be ampersand copy. Okay? It should look the same. So we'll save this and let's run it. So there's semantic, and that's what it looks like. Not a whole lot because we haven't put any CSS in here yet. All right, but you notice the header comes on top. Then here's our nav section in here. Here's our main section. Everywhere it looks like, I believe that's our whole main section. We've got an article. And we might have sections. Okay, and I don't know if this is another section or what. And there's our footer. All right. And again, the idea is you can set this stuff up, and then especially once you come in, as we'll start doing shortly, adding some HTML to really make it look the way you want it to look. So it says take some time to look over the code and understand it. The comments should help in your understanding. So again, what do we have here? At the top, so for right now, let's just forget about everything that's pre-body. So all this stuff that's up here. We've talked about this already. So let's jump down into our body section. So this is our header. And again, we could put anything in the world we wanted to put in here. We could add images, etc. We can also come in if we want to and combine this just to show you what that would look like then. All right, it's probably still not going to look the way I want it to look, but it's going to be getting there. So in our header, I'm going to take this and I'm going to move this down and I'm going to put it down there. Now we've got in our header, we've got both the header and the nav section. Now I bet you it's going to look the same. If not, then darn close to the same as the way it just looked. All right. But I'm just showing you yet another way that this can be done. So this is where we've got our navigation bar, and they've also added a search thing in here. So how would we get this to all appear on the same line? All right. Well, what we could have done, and I believe this will work, let's see, is we could have taken this whole nav section and put it inside of a div tag. Now, again, it's not going to probably look much different. But what you're going to see happening is once you start using some HTML, some CSS, it's going to start looking the way we want it to look. All right, I just don't want to get into too much of a tangent right now. So we've got our nav, and then this is our main section. You'll notice it takes up most of our document. Inside of our main section, we've got an article, which is in here. We've got an aside, which is here. And there's our footer at the bottom. All right, so looking at these elements as it says in more detail. This isn't something that is worth your time to go out and say, well, I'm going to memorize this. No, that's not what you want to do. You want to know how to use them. So as it says, main is for content unique to the page. Should be put directly inside of the body tag. Shouldn't be nested within other elements. Article is going to be inside of main. As it says, it encloses a block of related content that makes sense on its own without the rest of the page. Section is similar to article, but as it says, it's more for grouping together a single part of a page, a summary or whatever. And aside, that's more similar to what I mentioned to you before with the article about a fireman. It contains tangential type of content, not directly related to the main content, but can provide additional information. Header, as we said, introductory content. The nav for the nav bar, and the footer for the footer. All right. Now, let's say I don't want to use these. Or let's talk about how it was before we had the days of having these semantic tags. Well, before we had those semantic tags, we used div and span. All right. The div tag is a block level element. So it'll basically be encapsulated, for lack of words, in its own area, and it'll have a blank line before and after it. The span is an inline element, so it won't. So as it says here, span is an inline non-semantic element. So you could have taken what they did here and done it all without the HTML5 semantic tags and made it look exactly the same. But it wouldn't have made as much sense to the browser had you done that. That's why you use these tags. So whereas div is an inline non-semantic, whereas span is an inline non-semantic, div is a block level non-semantic. All right, and again, they give you examples of each one of these. All right, we've talked about line breaks before, so I'm not going to do that again, but I will mention about the HR, which is the horizontal rule. Let's put one of those in, just so indeed, for completeness sake, you can see this. So let's see, right after our home page, I'm going to put in here an HR. All right, and when I run this, and you say it doesn't look any different, then let me refresh the page. Not here. All right. Take a look under home page, what happens when I refresh. There's a horizontal rule. By default, it takes up 100% of the screen, but you can use CSS, so if I only wanted to take up 50% or whatever, you can do that as well. Again, we're going to be getting into all that pretty soon. All right, so let's look at this. Planning a simple website. It says once you've planned out the structure of a simple web page, the next logical step is to try to figure out what content you want, how many pages you'll need, how each page will be arranged, how the pages will link to one another. The author here call this information architecture. As it says, in a large complex site, this can be a big process, but for a simple website, it's really and truly not. So, bear in mind, it says here, that you have a few elements in common for most every page. So in other words, the nav, the header, the footer, etc. will probably be the same on every page. All right? Maybe not the header, but at least, they give you examples here of what would be, So next, you rough out a sketch. Now, instead of roughing it out, I've already shown you this using balsamic markup. All right? Then it says brainstorm all the other content, what you're going to want to put in here, where you're going to want to put it, etc. Then try to sort the things out. Does some stuff belong together or not together? Then it says try to sketch out a rough sitemap. Oftentimes the old joke is you use a pen and a napkin with this. All right, so that's pretty much it. Again, I'd strongly suggest you go over this structuring a page of content that's in here. And we're going to be looking at this in just a couple of minutes. So, we have now gone through 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 of these, 6 of these. So we're up to the debugging. And that's what we're going to do next. I'll be back with that in just a couple of minutes.